So at what point did you realize, okay, it is very important for me to serve my Hispanic community? And how has that shaped your entrepreneur journey?
They made money, they had money, but it was in shambles, right? So a lot of them made money because they're hardworking. And I think that's the story for most immigrants in the United States.
I would agree.
You come here because you want the American dream, and immigrants are the hardest working community in the United States. Social media is very intense. It's like Survivor, but on social media. Maintain control a little bit is by limiting my safe place, my family, stuff like that. But you have to be comfortable with criticism because people are ruthless. People are online bullies. They have a phone in their hands and they'll tell you things that they would never tell you in person.
Right.
But they have the courage to do it because they're behind the phone or behind the computer.
Right.
But it is important. I always tell them, say, oh, but do you have to work? And I said, okay, well, yes. Do you like to go to Disney? Do you like to go on vacation? Yes, of course. And I said, how do you think you pay for that? You got to work. And this is what we have to do. We have to work.
Today, we have Anika Milian joining us on the FoundHers Circle podcast. She is an amazing wife, mom, entrepreneurial, and her focus is providing educational content and legal resources for the Hispanic community. I am so happy to have her on, and I know that you're going to find value in this conversation. Please join us. Thank you, Anika, for joining me. I would love for my audience to get to know you. Can you give us a little bit of a background about yourself?
Yes. Hi. Thank you for having me. My name is Anika. I came from Cuba when I was 7 years old. Miami raised me because I went to Braddock, then FIU, then St. Thomas, and I'm an FIU again for my master's, but it's because I'm a forever student.
Yeah.
And I'm an attorney. I practice mostly real estate, estate planning, and business. I have 2 children, a husband, and I like to travel a lot. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Yes, you do have a very interesting background. I think and correct me if I'm wrong, you started practicing and litigating, working for someone else, and now you've transitioned to you're building this super impressive law firm. How has that journey been, and where do you see it going?
I was of the mentality, when I graduated in 2015, I was of the mentality of, I need to, wherever I get a job, the market was completely different back then than it is now. I feel like now law students that are out of law school and they recently passed the bar can do a little bit more of choosing than at least I was able to do. So anyway, I started applying and I got a job offer in a litigation firm in Broward, which is quite a hike for me. But I don't regret it one bit because I got a lot of experience right away. So we did personal injury, workers' comp, and first-party insurance. So like against the insurance company, if you have like a roof leak, a fire, different things like that. And I started litigating right away. So it's a small firm, and in small firms, I find that you get more experience if you're a law student. Just in case any law student will watch this podcast, I encourage them to, if they can start small, they do, because they learn everything. I learned from how to network, to referral fees, to going to court, motions, depots, everything. So yes, I started litigating. Then I went on to another litigation firm where I also had another great mentor there. And then I decided that I wanted to do my own thing. So I have my business partner and we worked together when I was a law clerk, and she was recently out of law school. So she graduated, I think, in 2013. And we said, let's join forces, and that way we can do what we want. We can pick the cases we want or whatever. We started litigating because that's what we knew. Then when I started seeing a need in the market, and I don't mean like, I meant like in my market, my people, right? Hispanics, the Hispanic community. I saw a need where there was no good advice for small business owners, investors, either immigrants or first-generation Americans that their parents were immigrants and they never learned how to invest, how to structure properly, what contracts to have and whatever. And since I had that litigation background where I could see where problems could arise for these people, I said, this is what I would like to do because I'm practicing law. I am helping my community, and it's something that I actually think that I could make a huge impact in. And then that's when we started segue to transactional, and it's been great. It's been, amazing. Not that it's less work, because we were just talking about it before. Some people could think it's less work because you don't go to court, you don't do this, you don't do that. It's the same amount of work. It's just very different. And to me, it's also important to be a mom. And litigation is very, very, for example, and you know this, right? If the judge says you have to be at a hearing at 8:00 in the morning, you can't drop off your kids that day, because there's no way you make it to downtown Miami for a hearing at 8:15, 8:30, and leave your kids at school. And to me, it's very important to be present for my children. So not only did I want to do it, because like I said, I saw a need in my community, I did it also to be more present and to just kind of be able to work with my schedule a little bit more, you know? So it's been great.
Yeah, I think there's this interpretation of what the life of an entrepreneur, because we're really working, there's really no set hours, because if you can't work from 9 to 10, I bet you're going to be working from 9 to 10 p.m. to make up for the time that you couldn't do during the day.
And you wear many hats as well. You don't only practice law, right? You work on the business, you work with the bookkeeper, you check the numbers, you do your marketing, you film content, because you have to, because these days you need.
It's a necessity.
It's a necessity. You manage employees. There's so much that you do. So yes, during the day, sometimes you do all these things, and then at night you got to work on the client files because work needs to get done.
Absolutely. So kind of going to a foundational question, did you always have an entrepreneurial spirit? Because
yes.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, funny story, when I was a kid, I used to ride the bus home, because my parents, I was born in Cuba, so my parents, they had to work, like very hardworking immigrant family. And the bus driver, I remember, I don't know if it was like middle school or like I was, late elementary, like 5th grade. And the bus driver used to sell lollipops in the bus to the students. I think they were like 50 cents. So I told my parents, let's go to Costco, or I don't know, whatever was around back then, right? Let's go to Costco, and I want to buy lollipops. And I started selling them for 25 cents.
You were trying to undercut
I was like, undercut the competition. I can make a killing with trying to sell lollipops.
You saw an opportunity and you were going to.
Correct.
Right.
So the bus driver ended up calling my mom, and he was like, hey, you need to tell Anika to stop selling lollipops on the bus. She's killing my business. So yes, I always had that, like, I'm an idea person.
Right.
So I which is good for business,
Absolutely.
I always have a bunch of ideas. My husband is like, Mija, I can't keep up. One at a time.
I have the same problem. I think he's kind of, after 19 years, he's kind of adapted to, or like tune me out at some point, like know when it's important to listen to me and know when not to listen to me. Yeah. But I agree. I have that same, this never shutting off of ideas.
I know I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And my husband's in tech. So a lot of my ideas like involve the doer. And I'm like, I have this idea. And he's like, you realize I have my own business too. And I said, well, we can work on it on our downtime.
Because you have so much downtime, I'm sure. I want to touch on something that you mentioned, and I hope you don't mind that I share this, but I think one of our last conversations over the phone, or a couple months ago, you were very in tune with what your purpose was.
Yes.
And being aligned with that purpose. And I remember, because it struck me when you said it to me, because sometimes I flounder with what is my purpose. And I think it's so important, because once you're laser focused on that, then okay, this is what I'm doing. And you kind of,
everything aligns, like it kind of falls into place.
Yes. So at what point did you realize, okay, it is very important for me to serve my Hispanic community? And how has that shaped your entrepreneur journey?
Well, I'm really good with clients. Like, I connect with people very well, because the majority of my clientele is Hispanic, they're immigrants. So there's a lot of like synergy and like natural connection with what I am, how I came. I wasn't born here, right? So I came when I was 7. I became a lawyer. So I've always connected very well with people, and I talk to people about everything. So when I used to litigate, if they were a personal injury client, we would talk about everything, their entire life. If I was doing their insurance claim, we would talk about everything. And I started noticing a very clear pattern, which is lack of structure, lack of information. And I used to see these people that They were so successful.
Right.
They made money. They had money, but it was in shambles, right?
Right.
So a lot of them made money because they're hardworking. And I think that's the story for most immigrants in the United States.
I would agree.
You come here because you want the American dream, and immigrants are the hardest working community in the United States. So when I started noticing that pattern of like, there is such a need for good information because there's so much crappy information out there, especially in today's age where people can literally turn on a camera and say whatever, right? And that's when I saw, this is what I want to do, because it's kind of like it checks off a lot of boxes for me, right? I help people, I inform people, they do with that information what they want,
Right.
you know, and I practice what I went to school for, you know, which is practicing law. So I saw a need and I went for it. And then I started seeing people were very grateful because I started talking to people. And even if it was like, at the beginning, I used to talk to a lot of people like with messages, and they were like, thank you so much. Because of this video, I didn't buy this property and I saved, I don't know how much.
That's amazing.
Because of this video. And I'm like, all right, so cool. I'm doing something right. Let me continue. And that's when it's kind of like reassured me. And I was like, all right, this is what I want to focus on,
Right.
helping these hardworking people avoid problems that they're very easily avoidable if they just plan accordingly.
Right.
So that's when I saw it, and it kind of like clicked. And then everything else kind of falls into place. You know how you're going to structure your business. You know who is your ideal client. You know how you're going to, do your videos. You start knowing all these things because you're like, all right, this is what I want to do. And it's from there, it's not easier. It's just clearer.
Right. And I think during the harder times, Yeah, because they're inevitable. I think if anybody tells you that there aren't any hard times, run far away from them.
No.
Because I don't think that they understand.
And the legal industry is very difficult in the sense that you are dealing with people's problems. Yeah. I do happier law now. Like I say, right? Since I don't litigate, it's happier. Most people are like happy to start a business, happy to buy an investment property, happy to buy their first house. So but it doesn't mean it's problemless, right? It's just different.
And when you add administrative concerns, right? Yeah. It's not like you're not
no. Right. By any means. It's just more, if you have your why always present, it makes it easier.
I agree.
Right. It's kind of like, and I don't want to offend anybody, but people that have a lot of faith, it gets them through the hard times, right? So when you're a person of faith, even in the darkest of times, you are able to find a way forward.
Persevere, right.
It's very similar in knowing your why, because even in the worst of times, you're like, remember why you started. It gives you purpose, because otherwise you're like a boat that has no clear path forward. You're lost at sea, basically. Right. That would be my 2 cents. So it became easier.
We touched a little bit about social media, and it is, so it can be fun, but also it brings on its challenges. Yes. How have you become comfortable putting yourself out there? And what have you seen has it been fruitful for your business? What advice can you give somebody that's kind of deciding, do I do this? How do I implement it in my business?
Okay. Social media is very intense. It's like Survivor, but on social media. Yeah. So if you have clear your purpose, your why you're doing it, I think it'll be a lot easier. It definitely is very difficult to expose yourself. For me, for example, I don't really expose my personal life all too much because it's my personal life. I don't post my children online, for example. That's a personal choice of mine. I don't really, anything that's too personal. And that's how I feel safe, if that makes any sense, right? Like you expose yourself, you put yourself out there for the world, expose yourself to criticism and, whatever. So how do I maintain control a little bit is by limiting my safe place, my family, stuff like that. But you have to be comfortable with criticism because people are ruthless. People are online bullies. They have a phone in their hands and they'll tell you things that they would never tell you in person.
Right.
But they have the courage to do it because they're behind the phone or behind the computer. So what I do, for example, is let's say I post a video that I know will be controversial. I may not read all the comments, and I get thousands sometimes. I may not read all of them because it's not good for my mental health.
Right.
You know, so that's how and I used to respond to all of them. But then I saw another content creator and she posted a video about, you know, don't even respond to the negativity because that just brings more negativity. So I don't even, you know, now I'm like, all right, you know, whatever. I move on. And it's fine. People can disagree with you all the time. And if you're respectful, I don't mind that you disagree with me. I actually make videos about using that comment as an example to like, this is how people can disagree. This is how, what I don't care about that. But people insult you and people call you stupid and people call you, you know, all slew of bad words.
Right.
You have to be comfortable with that because at the end of the day, it does more good than it does harm, at least in my view. And that's just kind of like take it with a grain of salt and move on. Yes, it's been great for my business to answer your second question. And it's just kind of like, you know, the good can be good without the bad.
Right.
Because that's why you still find or you put it into perspective of like, okay, this is good because there's bad. That's how you know it's good. Or how do you know something's bad? Well, because there's good things, you know, different things like that. So just kind of like roll with the punches and you continue doing what you do and you post out there what you want to post.
Right.
You know, if you want to make a controversial video, you make it because you want to. Just how people can express themselves, so can you. And if people don't like it, you know, hey, it's part of the process.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I think that's a good perspective to have. It's probably not your initial perspective, I would think. Like,
No, this is my refined, it's
Right.
taken me time to get here. Before I was like, look at this jerk, I'm going to respond. And now I'm just like, oh, whatever, you know, I move on.
Yeah. Also, like, the more followers you get, the less time really you have to necessarily
Sometimes
answer. Right.
people message me and they're like, you never respond. And I'm like, I try, but it's important to keep, and I tell people, I'm like, it's important to keep in mind that when you message me and I respond, it's me.
Right.
I don't have somebody that's responding to messages. So sometimes it takes me a little bit longer, which is why I also tell people, like, I have my contact information in the feed. I have my office phone number. Like, if you need me, call there because there people will respond.
Right.
Sometimes I can't get to everything. Unfortunately, I wish I could, but that's not my full-time job, you know? Right. So that's like another kind of difficulty. And as you scale, you have to think about these things, you know?
You mentioned that you're a mom of two. I know because our kids go to school together, and I've seen how intense that can be. The schedule of being a room mom and trying to be as active as
I'm
possible.
out one this year.
Yeah, neither am I. I'm taking a sabbatical.
Glorious. So like, okay, well,
I'm definitely taking a sabbatical because I need it. I burnt out a little bit. But even if you're not a room mom and you still want to be involved in your kids' lives, like, how do you balance being a business owner, being a wife, because we also want to be good spouse, great, and being a good parent and sort of juggling it all? How do you balance that?
it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Some days I lose my shit,
Mm-hmm.
but we all do.
Yeah.
And I think people need to know that.
Absolutely.
Because another thing about social media is that the people that do share their lives, and there are lifestyle influencers or lifestyle content creators out there, and they have the most perfect videos, the most aesthetic videos,
Right.
and they paint this, and it's important. And then us mortals, we're like, like, what the heck am I doing? Like, am I a bad mom? Am I a bad wife? Am I a bad daughter?
Right.
You know, but honestly, that is just, it's a facade, or it's like what you portray out. It's like a persona, if you will, right? So it's important to know that we are not what we put online. You know, we have like, so some days, yes, I lose my shit and I'm like, you better do your homework or you're going to be so grounded.
Right.
Because it's very difficult. And you have 4 kids.
Yeah.
So I don't know how the heck you do that. I have 2 kids and sometimes I lose my shit. And my son is in 2nd grade and my daughter is still in daycare. So I have a little bit of a break, if you will. So I could just,
In between.
by the time that he's more self-sufficient, then I'm starting with her to, you know, the kindergarten and all that stuff. But it's very, very difficult. And what do? You work at night. You know, to answer your question, when you miss work during the day, you just work at night until you get to a place where, at least that's where I want to be, where I can do it. And if I miss work, it's okay and nothing happens and work is still getting done.
Right.
But that takes time. Like the road, it's very difficult.
It really is.
And then when you get there, cool, because people see the success, but they don't see the years of struggle. Like it's very difficult to get there. I mean, I've been out of law school for 10 years and I'm still not there. some people are great, like kudos to them. I look up to them like, hey, if someone's watching, give me your secret. But it's very difficult.
It's very difficult. And I don't know if it's a facade, but like for instance, I'm not going to show my kids breaking down, right? Like that's, nobody's going to do that. Maybe there are some like lifestyle influencers that choose to do that to make them seem, I don't know, more relatable. But I'm also thinking about, I also am very careful about what I show about my kids. And I can't not show them at all because they're such an integral part of our family business and my life.
Right.
So I am very careful about what I show, what I say about them. But it is very hard to balance all those roles, even if you work for yourself, even more so because like you said, you don't clock out. If you work for someone else, you leave at 5 and for the most part you can kind of, clock out. But when you work for yourself, you can't because whatever you didn't cover.
You can, some days are better than others in that regard, right? Some days you can say, all right, I left and that's it. Tomorrow will be another day. But for example, some days where, you do closings like I do, and sometimes it's 6 p.m. and you can't fund and there's something and everybody's calling you because I'm not getting my money and it's a Friday and they got to wait till Monday. Like we've all had that happen. But eventually you get to a time where you have to also like set boundaries with people and say, look, in this scenario, it's 6 p.m. I can't fund you at this time anyway. Banks are closed. Like this is a Monday problem.
Your wire is not getting to you today.
It's not getting to you today. You can get mad if you want to, but it kind of is what it is. Because otherwise, if you're like me, you'll spend all weekend long thinking about this person who doesn't have their money.
I know.
So it's very, very difficult.
It is.
But it's important to kind of like start practicing at making these strides so that you can get to a place where you're like, you know what? Hey, it's just not happening. And then it doesn't ruin your family time because it ruins mine sometimes.
Same.
And then it's like, oh my God, now I'm worrying about this. And I can't even be like fully present because my mind, in the back of my mind, it's, it's always there. So it's very difficult.
It is. And for like, my husband doesn't really understand because he has a job where he could be like, okay, it's 4:30. I'm done. Bye. Where I'm like thinking about, did I send an email to the client? Did it get funded? Did that wire get there? Like, there's a lot of things that we have on our brain that it's really hard to shut off completely.
My husband is an entrepreneur as well. So to that end, he does understand.
Right.
But then the difficult part of this, of my relationship is where we're both entrepreneurs, is the balancing the time. Right? Because we have to have very good communication. Like, for example, today, just before I got here, he's like, I'm going to be home late today because, we're doing this project or whatever. And he goes, just make plans, So we have to always be in constant communication to make sure that he works from home most of the time because he's in tech. But, sometimes he like a day like today. So today I have to make sure that I take on homework because then if I'm late, but he's home, he can handle it. So it's just about constant communication and making, arrangements.
Yeah.
And then also it takes a village. I know it's super cheesy to say that because everybody says that. We're fortunate that we have a lot of help from our parents and stuff like that. But my parents can't do homework with the kids.
Yeah.
They're past that. They did homework with me. They're like, all right, they're done. They're checked out. I can ask them to watch them.
Yeah.
But, it's always in the back of my mind. We're like, all right, what's happening with homework or, whatever. So it's very difficult. It's still, I would still do it. If I could pick, I would still do it because it's rewarding. You have flexibility. You do what you want. For me, those things are, must-haves.
Right. You mentioned your husband and like tag teaming, and I can certainly relate to that. And I think if young women are listening to this, what would you say about that? Like choosing the right spouse, because I know that I wouldn't be able to do not even half of the things that I do. And not that I'm not an independent woman and all that, but the reality is I have 4 kids. We have 2 businesses. Like there's only a certain amount of time we could do. And if we didn't work together, nothing would get done.
The fact that you are an independent woman, that has nothing to do. I have a problem with today's society. How, I'm all for female empowerment.
Right.
But let's be honest. If you're in a family and you chose, because this is a choice, to get married, and you chose to have kids, then you need to count on your partner. and he will count on you. And it doesn't mean anything. It just means that this is the life that you're choosing. So if you want to be an independent woman and not count with anybody, then maybe you don't get married. Maybe you don't have kids and you just focus on, and all power to you. And the wonderful thing about today is that we're more accepting to that, I feel like, as a society than we were back then. Back then, women had to get married, you were shunned upon like, oh, look at this one, they don't have kids. Now it's not like that at all. So if that's you, that's great. But yes, if you're a young woman, you're watching this and you are going to choose to get married and you're going to choose to be a mom, then you need to communicate with your partner and you will rely on each other. It doesn't make you less independent. It's a partnership.
Right. No, I agree. I don't like that conversation that's being had. I think that if you go into a marriage thinking that you don't need to count on your spouse, like it's not
What
going
are
to
you doing?
Like it's
Why
really
get married?
Right.
My 2 cents. I could be completely wrong.
No, right.
But that's just my opinion. Why get married? Just do your own thing. Have a boyfriend forever, or a girlfriend, or whatever. Doesn't matter. But
how has your husband dealt with your growth on social media? Has he ever like felt, oh no, I don't know if I want her to be like so out there. Like, what does this mean? Or has he always been like your number one fan?
he's very supportive.
Yeah.
What he has struggled with is the negative comments.
Right.
So obviously nobody likes for their partner to, be subject to criticism.
Right. He wants to offend them.
Right. So at first he would, and then he's like, I can't even read them anymore because I swear to God, if I read them, I'm going to lose it. And I'd rather not. So he doesn't. But yes, he supports all. He likes it. He's super into it.
That's awesome.
And if I ever have like an off week where I'm like, I'm just not feeling it, he goes, no, you have to get to posting because remember the algorithm.
Oh, it helps that he's in tech, so he understands.
He knows.
Background.
Yes, he knows. He goes, remember the algorithm, you have to post. And then, I've learned tips. Like I have good recording days where I feel like talking, around that day I'll make like 20 videos. And then if I have an off week, I'm like, all right, I'll post one of those.
You have enough
videos.
Cushion, yeah.
Put it there.
That's awesome.
It is a lot of work.
It's
a lot of work. So, but he's supportive.
And then my final question, and this is something maybe I could learn from you. I struggle with this is I was born in the United States, but I come from immigrant, like first generation. And we obviously want to give our kids everything that we didn't have, right? But we also struggle with not wanting them to be spoiled or entitled, or I want them to be as hungry, if not hungrier than I am. How do you implement things in your life? Because obviously you've been able to succeed in your field. You're growing a very successful law firm. How do you implement things in your life to make sure that your kids see your growth and see like the whole process, not just that little glimpse of success, so that they can also then turn around and do something?
It's a very difficult question to answer because I'm stricter in that regard and my husband's more of a giver. And then he's a stricter parent when it comes to discipline, and I'm more like lax, I'm more lenient. I'm the lenient parent. But when it comes to that, I'm very strict. And it's funny because I always tell my son, te voy a mandar pa Cuba 2 o 3 días para que tú veas what it is to be hungry and have no toys and no tech, no nothing, He listens to me like,
yeah, please don't.
Right. He has, and my mom is like, you need to relax. And I said, no, because it's very difficult for kids. I think it's very, very difficult for kids that are already born with an advantage like ours to fully understand at least the struggle. Like I used to go clean offices with my parents when I got out of school. Yeah. And I used to be like in high school, and I used to change the trash and help them clean and help them vacuum. My kids are never going to do that.
Right.
But it is important. I always tell them, say, oh, but do you have to work? And I said, okay, well, yes. Do you like to go to Disney? Do you like to go on vacation? Do you like? Yes, of course. And I said, how do you think you pay for that? You got to work. And this is what we have to do. We have to work. So that's one thing that I'll do. I talk to my son, my daughter's 2. She doesn't get it yet, but she'll get the same speech. My son, I talk to him a lot in that regard. So I always tell him, this is what we have to do. I used to clean offices. I make him do chores, and then I'll pay him like $1 or $2. Like just the point is so that he understands that you get money when you work. And then when we go to the store, like for example, if he tells my dad, Can you take me to the store? And I said, yes, take your money. And I told my dad, you better not pay for anything because I swear to God, I will be
Grandparents.
right. Okay, he said, don't make me do that. And I said, it's for his own good.
Right.
So even if he wants an ice cream, I go, take your own money, pay for it.
Yeah.
And then I make him pay for it so that he understands. And
Right.
even then, you know, he can be entitled.
I know.
It's very difficult.
I know. I struggle with that because I do. I want them to be hungry and I want them to understand that good things come from hard work.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, like you as parents, we want to shield them from a lot of the things that like you just mentioned, you know, that you would go with your parents and help them. You want to protect them, but
would it be the worst thing ever?
right.
For them to come here and help you make a copy or scan a paper?
Right.
Probably not. At least your older kids, that they are able to whatever, and they have to know that this is what it takes and you got to work.
Right.
So a lot of it is communication. And then one thing that I haven't done yet, but my mentor when I first started practicing law did, because her kids were older, is she would take her kids to like Camilo's house and whatever to actually like feed the homeless.
Mm-hmm.
And they would do a lot of charity activities. And one, giving back to a community is always amazing. But number two is you put good values in your kids and you're like, this is what less fortunate people live like.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always very important to keep into perspective, you know, that you don't go through this, but there are people out there that do.
Right.
So that's something that I want to start doing now that he's older and I'm able to do it. And also he understands, because it's like a 4-year-old to do that. They have no idea what's going on.
Know.
But my kid's going to be 8. So I feel like he already understands what it's like. And that's something that I'm going to start implementing, because I saw other parents do it and their children have turned out. It's like anything. It's kind of like the luck of the draw. I know some very good parents that, you know, that their kids, you know, don't walk the right path or the path that we would have wanted as parents.
Mm-hmm.
But you do the best that you can. And you know that if that happens to you, it's not because of something you did. It's just because
Life's
así es la vida,
right.
you know?
Yes, I agree. And I think it's helpful in the sense that none of my kids, even my youngest, who's going to be 5, they weren't born to us where we are right now, right? They've kind of seen the whole trajectory, and I tell that to Sean all the time. It's like, well, they saw us building from scratch. They see us every weekend working. They see us at night, you know, balancing all of our roles. So I think it's different for a child that perhaps, you know, was born at the peak, you know, or let's just say the peak of their parent success. Right. My kids, for the most part, have all witnessed the whole journey. And hopefully that is helpful to them. But still, you know, as parents, we have that in the back of our
It's that old school mentality of the old school. Like, I knew a very successful gentleman when I was a kid. My mom always puts him as an example. She goes, Fulanito used to make his kids, and he was super rich, wash their cars, you know, and pay them for that. And I'm like, so that's perfectly good. Yeah, because guess what? You have to know the meaning of hard work.
Right.
It's easier for me to just hand you, you know, X, Y, Z, but no, you have to know the meaning of hard work. Like, it's very, very important. Otherwise, you may not even want to go to school, which, listen, in today's world, my hot take, or maybe controversial, is that college is not necessary for everybody.
No,
to make money, not to make money, but hard work is because even, you know, and a lot of people like to point to social media to that end, like, hey, you create content. Oh, that's super easy. You don't even got to go to school to do that. No, you don't got to go to school to do that, but you have to put out a good product. You have to film, you have to edit, you have to sacrifice, you have to like, it's still work.
Yes, I think,
you know,
people assume it's like turn on the camera,
you know,
and
no, and you have to have a niche, and you got to think about the content, and you got to be strategic, and it's very, you know, you have to work. So I think the work ethic is what you must have. School, maybe not.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and if you had asked me when I was growing up, I would have had a different perspective, because coming from immigrants, my mom was like, you need a degree. It's not an option for you. Grades are not an option. Like, that is a must. And yes, I do agree, it can be important for those specific industries, like law. Obviously, you need a law degree, a doctor, you know, like very
engineers, nurses, right, people like that. But sociology, the heck you gonna do with them?
Right. Like
Anthropology, women's studies,
Right.
philosophy.
beautiful to study. I'm not like
No,
knocking
I
on it,
love
but-
the subjects.
right.
I would love to just sit in a philosophy class and ponder about what is the meaning of time for, 2 hours.
Exactly. But
However,
what is the long term?
that doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
It's great. It's good intellectually.
Right.
I will still encourage my kids to go to school. I think it's encouraged in my house. Like education is very, very important. But realistically speaking, it's not the end of the world.
No, we know very successful people that probably didn't go to school or have no technical background and are still able to achieve.
But what do they have is that they're hardworking.
Absolutely.
That is one thing that you can go to school and do whatever and still be broke.
Yep.
But if you're a hard worker, you know, como es, hard work beats talent. Hard work beats talent all day.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So, final question. What is one piece of advice you think that would be beneficial for the mom entrepreneur that is sort of on the sidelines trying to figure out, do I want to start my own business?
Advice. Give yourself grace. Growth doesn't happen overnight. So if you don't see the growth that you want right away, don't be discouraged, but always do it with a purpose. So find out why you're doing what you want to do, whether it's a makeup line, creating content, jewelry, clothes, whatever industry you're in, nutrition, find your why you're doing it, like what you do, and one day at a time.
And if they need help with the legal structure, they should call you.
Sure.
That would be helpful. Thank you so much for joining me. I really
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
It was a blast.
All right.